what your expenses are going to look like in retirement is going to be a huge factor here in how much you ultimately need to generate to get there. All right, and welcome in to another episode of CFP Reacts, where I, your host, Scott Schiller, wealth management fiduciary and board certified financial planner, reacts to the best and worst financial advice in social media. And so I'm so glad that you joined me today. And in today's video, we're going to be reacting to a video that I really think is important. It's from a very well-known and popular finfluencer. This is a financial influencer, so finfluencer, Humphrey Yang. And in this video, he's talking about how to retire early, okay? And this is a very important subject. This is one that gets brought up a lot in my appointments and with clients and prospects on long-term retirement planning. And so a lot of important subjects in here. And so let's just go ahead and jump right into the video.
If we drew life on a timeline, would it make sense that we retire in our 60s yet have so little time left to enjoy it? In this video, I want to break down how we can retire as soon as possible, step by step, so that we can have more time to enjoy the things that we want to do in life. The first thing we need to understand is how retirement is defined in our society. It's not based off of your intelligence, your work ethic, or how many years you've worked. In fact, it all just comes down to one thing, and that is money. You can call it wealth, you can call it total assets, you can call it whatever you like, but the main point is that we need enough money or assets to basically fund the rest of our life while we're not working. Now, enough money for you is going to differ from what your friends, your family, or even strangers on the internet might want you to have, so everyone's calculations are going to be a little bit different. But in my opinion, it really comes down to three things that we actually need to answer first. So I actually found this resource online. It's a retirement calculator, and we can see that the variables we need to figure out are these top three lines right here: current annual income, current annual savings, and current annual expenses. If you know the answers to these three things, we can work backwards and figure out.
Doesn't necessarily need to be all three of those. You know, when I do retirement planning and long-term financial planning, the main thing is, of course, okay, what is our current income? Okay, so how much are we bringing in? How much are our current expenses? Yes, that's important as well. But also, what are our anticipated expenses in retirement, right? So everybody's retirement is going to be a little bit different in terms of their goals, their dreams, whether they want to travel, whether they have kids, not kids, whatever it may be, everyone's goals are going to be different. And so what your expenses are going to look like in retirement, which was not mentioned in here, is going to be a huge factor here in how much you ultimately need to generate to get there.
Figure out our quickest possible route to get there. So let's actually start by talking about your yearly expenses first. I think this is the biggest factor when it comes to figuring out how we're going to retire as quickly as possible. And then later on in this video, we're going to go over 4 must-dos that I think everyone should consider when trying to retire early. If you know how much money you're going to spend every single year, especially in retirement, it's going to guide exactly how much money you need to have invested to live off of. If you're young or you just want to retire,
I'd agree with that. That's definitely a big factor. We do need to know that, or at least have a general idea. We don't need to know exactly to the penny, but a general idea is definitely helpful and necessary to determine this.
Retire in say 10 years and you want your money to last forever, it's recommended that you have a 4% safe withdrawal rate. That means you're allowed to spend 4% of what you have invested in your portfolio every single year, and you can do that indefinitely without running out of money. So if you had an investment portfolio of $500,000, you could spend 4% of that every single year, or $20,000 and spend every year. If you had $1 million in a portfolio, you could spend $40,000 every year, and so on and so forth. The idea here is that your portfolio is going to make up for any inflation that you might experience, as well as any taxes that you might have to pay, as well as continue to appreciate as you withdraw money from it. So in this way, we can actually see that the amount that you spend on a yearly basis is going to be the #1 variable and contributing factor to how much you actually need in return.
Okay, so one quick note and just comment here on the 4% safe withdrawal rate, okay? And this is an industry standard here for retirement planning. Where did it come from, okay? And where it originated was a financial advisor actually back in the early 1990s out of California, last name was Benjamin, ended up doing a lot of research on taking a 50% portfolio of investments, that is 50% invested into stocks and 50% invested into bonds, okay? He went back over all these different 30-year periods of time, looking at rolling periods of time, so starting in 1950 through 1980, 1951 through 1981, 1952 through 1982 as an example there. And so looking at all these different rolling 30-year periods, and basically said, okay, let's pick the worst performing, meaning our worst timing over those time frames in terms of what is the absolute most that we can withdraw without losing money over any one of those 30-year periods, and ended up being the result was somewhere around 4.1%, thus born the 4% safe withdrawal rate or rule, okay? And what that means is essentially is if you draw 4% out of your portfolio, you're essentially, based on historical returns, you're essentially guaranteed not to run out. You know, this is a good standard. I think it's a good starting point for a conversation and a retirement plan. However, I must caution that it does depend on what our interest rate environment may be at that time. I would say, you know, if all of a sudden we're able to get, like we have in the last few years, a 5.5% or 6% return or guaranteed yield, or what's called a risk-free rate, okay? Risk-free rate of return means I take no risk and I get a return, such as on treasuries or things that are backed by a bank or guaranteed by a bank, are higher than 4%. Let's say we can get 5.5%, okay, for 30 years. Well, in that case, our safe withdrawal rate would be 5.5%, okay? So it just does depend on the environment, although 4 to 5% is a general idea and a good starting point.
Now, in terms of what to invest in when it comes to your portfolio to basically fund your retirement indefinitely, most financial experts will suggest investing in a total stock market index fund. Index funds like VTSAX, which is Vanguard's total stock market index fund, or the ETF equivalent VTI, since its inception in 2001, it has returned an average of 8.21% per year. I have a ton of videos for you guys on exactly what to consider when you're investing in order to withdraw at a safe withdrawal rate, and I will link those down below as well as at the end of this video. So assuming that we're using a 4% safe withdrawal rate, which is what most people should use, we should basically multiply our current spend every single year by 25, and that should be our nest egg number that we need to get to. That's the simple rule of thumb for most of you guys out there. If you just take your current yearly spend, let's say it's $50,000, multiply it by 25, then you need a nest egg of $1.25 million to withdraw that every single year without running out of money. Now, in order to get there as quickly as possible,
let me stop there. Without running out of money in 25 years, okay? So the whole concept here is to retire early, right? Well, if you retire at 40, okay, and you've planned for 25 years of withdrawal, the 4% safe withdrawal rate as an example, well, let's just hope you don't live a day past age 65, right? That's gonna be a big problem. The earlier you retire, the more pressure that's gonna be put on that 4% safe withdrawal rate, okay? So it may actually end up being more like 2% is the amount of safe withdrawal rate you need if you're gonna retire at 40, because we know life expectancy is gonna push us deep into our 70s. And so we'd be looking at a 40-year period of time, not 25 years. So that is not being explained here correctly, I don't believe.
There as quickly as possible, we need to figure out the next variable number 2, which is our current savings amount and our savings rate. You see, as your savings rate increases, this is actually a two-pronged effect. So if your savings rate increases, that actually just means you're spending less money. When you're spending less money,
not necessarily. You could also just be making more money. Doesn't necessarily, just because your savings rate goes up doesn't necessarily mean that your expenses went down. Your income could have gone up and your expenses could have stayed the same, thus creating a higher savings rate. And so it does have to do with your income as well.
Spending less money, you technically don't need to save as much money because that's gonna get you to your nest egg number, or what's called your FIRE number, quicker. FIRE stands for Financial Independence Retire Early. It's a subreddit that you can find on the Reddit forums, and it's basically a community of people that are trying to retire as quickly as possible. Their main plan is to save 30, 50, or even 70% of their yearly income every single year, and they do that by being extremely frugal and making sacrifices in the short term in order to get to financial independence a lot faster. Now, if we simply play around with that retirement calculator that I mentioned earlier, you can see that someone with a current annual income of $75,000 and a 70% savings rate can retire in 8 years. As soon as you turn that savings rate down to 50%, which is still a lot of savings, by the way, it's going to take you a little bit longer, so 14.3 years instead of the 8 years from earlier. And then if you turn that savings rate even lower to 20%, it's going to take you much longer to get there, 28.5 years. Now, if we play around with this calculator enough, we can create a table, play around around with the savings rates and then just figure out how many years we need to work in order to retire. As your savings rate increases by 5% throughout the table, we can see that the number of working years will actually decrease disproportionately. At a savings
I love the zero. It'd take 100 years if you save zero.
Savings rate of 10%, we can see that it takes 51 years of working until you hit retirement. As we go down the table, we can actually see that it becomes a lot easier to retire as our savings rate increases. In fact, it gets really good at the 65% savings rate mark. That's where you could start to potentially retire within a decade. Now, what's really fascinating about this entire table is that most Americans, they have a savings rate of 4.5%. That means if our savings rate is of the average American, it's gonna take us forever to retire. That's why if you're watching this channel, hopefully you're striving for a little bit more than a 5% savings rate. Hopefully you're aiming for at least 15% or even higher. All right, so let's go through an example of what it would take to retire at different types of spend levels. So let's say you are the age of 30 right now and you really want to retire in 10 years, which is pretty reasonable. I mean, who doesn't want to retire at 40, right? Your current spend is $40,000 a year and you're just going to maintain that spend in perpetuity, as well as the fact that you have an average savings balance of around $30,000 in your portfolio right now, because that is the actual average savings balance of someone who's less than the age of 35 in America. So if you want to spend 40K a year, we're gonna need at least $1 million portfolio.
I don't agree with this, the 25 years, right? So again, you're retiring at 40, okay? Your retirement is going to last 40 to 50 years. It's gonna be double this, okay? You're gonna need the $2 million to make it work. And this is a big issue here with his numbers. The other thing I have an issue with is the $40,000 current spend. I mean, it's very, very difficult to be 30 years old, even if you were single with no kids at all, to live on $40,000 a year in any major city in the United States. I mean, the rent alone or your housing expenses alone are gonna eat up the majority of that. That's not including your taxes, food, gas, vehicle expenses, anything else. So this is just really, I think the purpose of this video can give us one takeaway here, is that just how difficult it would actually be to be a self-made retiree at age 40. It's almost like asking someone to climb Mount Everest twice in one day. It's very, very difficult.
Portfolio in order to do that, and that means we're going to need to invest at least $63,000 every single year for 10 years, getting an 8% return. What does that look like? Well, that means if you're spending $40,000 a year, you need to be making at least $103,000 after tax in order to get to that number. So that means your ideal pre-tax income is $147,000 per year or more. This essentially means that while you're spending on your lifestyle of $40,000 per year for the next 10 years, you're also saving enough money and investing and getting a compound return on that money in order to get to that point where you can retire in 10 years with a nest egg of $1 million. Now, that's a 62% savings rate, which is incredibly tough to achieve. I acknowledge that, as well as a $147,000 pre-tax income. Now, if you make less money and you're okay retiring in, say, 15 years instead of 10 years, then your savings rate doesn't have to be as high. In fact, you can achieve this with a 46% savings rate, as well as an after-tax income of $75,000 if you're okay retiring in 15 years. That's a little bit more manageable, but still, that might still be out of reach for some people. So what if we want to retire on less money? We can still feasibly retire in 20 years with a smaller income and even smaller of a savings rate. If we earn roughly $58,000 a year.
Yeah, it really just comes down to a math equation, right? The less that you spend in retirement, the less you're going to ultimately need. However, what's not being factored in here is the earlier that you have this retirement built up, this nest egg built up, the more of it you're gonna need, because the longer you're gonna end up needing that money in the retirement, right? He's got it fixed here at 25 years, right? But what's not factored in is you know, if you wanna retire at 40, you do wanna live a day past 65, right? And so that's not being factored in here in these calculations.
After tax, which is $82,000 before tax, and we have a savings rate of 32%, then we can feasibly retire within 20 years based on the math. 20 years might seem like a long time, but it's still way faster than how the average American retires by the time they're 65 years old. So for example, if you're 20 years old right now, you could probably retire by the time you're 40 based on this math, instead of having to wait till you're 65. I wanted to show you guys all these examples to just show you how much the the savings rate and how much you currently spend is going to dictate how early you can retire. How much you save on a yearly basis is going to be a really big factor in how quickly you can retire, and that's why we want to make sure that lifestyle creep is not creeping up on us. If you're making lifestyle choices like trying to keep up with your friends or buying that new fancy car or going on those luxury vacations all the time, then that's possibly literally costing you your freedom of retirement later on. The third factor is our current income, and this is going to basically determine how quickly we can get to our FIRE number. If you make more money, you'll be able to get to retirement a lot sooner. This is pretty much a fact of life as long as your expenses stay the same. Being able to retire is not cheap, nor is it easy, and having more money in the bank and having more money coming in is going to help you in that journey. Now, you don't have to find a better paying job or even a side hustle to increase your income. If you want a creative solution on how to increase your pay, then you might want to consider the location that you live in. Oftentimes, I'll get comments from teachers and other types of jobs that have a limited upside when it comes to their industry. So basically, if you're a teacher, it's hard to increase your income past a certain level. So I was trying to think of a creative solution for you guys in how you could increase your income, and the example that I came up with is the following. Let's say you're a teacher in Tennessee. The average pay there for a teacher is $53,619 per year. If you saved 10% of your income in Tennessee, you're saving $5,361 per year. Now, if you were to consider a lateral move, let's say you went to a school district in Massachusetts instead, the average teacher salary in Massachusetts is $88,903 per year. If you save 10% of your income there, then you're going to be saving $88.90 per year, which is almost $3,500 more than you would be saving in Tennessee. What you can do then is just do this for a number of years and then move back to Tennessee when you—
Oh, wait, okay. I mean, I love the idea, but what's not being discussed here is while you're, yes, absolutely agree with the salary differences there in these two different states, but one of the issues is you got to live in Massachusetts, right? The cost of living is a lot higher in Massachusetts, and also let alone the tax rates. They call it Taxachusetts for a reason, right? The taxes are higher, the cost of living is higher, right? And so your net pay, your net take-home dollar may ultimately end up being the same, right? And so you've moved from Tennessee to Massachusetts, back to Tennessee, and chances are you might as well just have stayed in Tennessee all the whole time, less the moving costs, right? And so there's a higher cost of living. Yes, there's a higher salary, but there's a higher cost of living that needs to be factored.
Are ready to retire, and then basically your cost of living is going to be a lot lower for the rest of your life. This time,
okay, lower, but what about while you're living in Massachusetts, right? You can't earn a wage as a teacher in Massachusetts, but also have the cost of living going on back in Tennessee, and then just, it doesn't work like that way. You know, a lot of teachers end up being millionaires, right? And so mostly because they're systems oriented, right? They're really, really great savers for the most part. They subscribe to systems, they work in systems, and so having a systematic way to save over long periods of time ends up leading a lot of teachers into successful retirement plans.
Strategy
and into retirement.
Can be applied to many different jobs with limited upward mobility, especially within certain industries. And I do acknowledge that it takes some sacrifice as well as some flexibility in the fact that you're going to basically uproot your entire life and move somewhere else. So it does have some of its flaws, but it is a creative solution that I thought of. All right, let's talk about my 4 must-dos in order to help you reach retirement as quickly as possible. The first thing you must do is define your retirement preferences and also be flexible on how they might change. So do you want to spend 20K a year, 40K a year, 60K a year in retirement? Perhaps you want to spend as much money as possible and just never have to think about it. Figure out your retirement preferences early and don't be afraid to reevaluate it every single year. You might get to a point where you're able to retire early, but you realize, hey, it's going to be pretty boring if I'm just sitting around retired all day, so I'd rather just do a little bit of part-time work. The second thing you must—
This is true. I would definitely agree with that. You know, when we're thinking about retirement, you know, I've replaced the word retirement with financially independent, and that's ultimately where you want to be, right? You want to have enough money to where coming in or generating enough income off of your portfolio or retirement nest egg so that you don't necessarily have to work unless you want to. However, from a health standpoint and from a longevity standpoint, it is definitely in your best interest, and it's been proven over and over and over again that it's best to have a purpose, to be able to get up every morning and have a job, have work, whether it be volunteer. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be income producing labor, but having a purpose, having something going on leads to a much longer life for you. And so I advise all the time with my clients who are retiring or preparing for retirement to make sure that we think about these things going into it from a health standpoint.
Do is to avoid lifestyle creep as well as avoid any life decisions that derail your compounding. Things like buying a crazy fancy new car or perhaps investing in a get-rich-quick scheme which asks you for a lot of money up front but is a risky frontier. We want to avoid those things. Third, we want to...
Agreed. That new Cybertruck that you bought is definitely going to derail our pathway to financially independent, could derail our path to financially independence, and certainly as a young age. And so, lifestyle creep is real. It affects all of us. It's just something that we need to be aware of, right? And so what lifestyle creep is, by definition, is as our income goes up, as we get deeper and deeper into our careers and we start earning more money, what lifestyle creep is that we then end up creating a more expensive lifestyle from that. And so, of course, the best way to handle that is to keep your lifestyle back when, your expense level back when you were 25 as opposed to now you're 45 as an example. And thus your savings rate's gonna be a lot higher as opposed to, living off of, all of your income, spending it on everything you can find, vacations, cars, clothes, things like that. And then thus putting more money in achieving that long-term compounded growth that you need in order to build up that big nest egg that we're gonna need later on.
We want to plan for as much as we can, not just with your investments, but also with your relationships, including your family decisions. So in terms of retiring early and the investment side, we got to really think and plan, when are we going to retire early? And then at what point do we have perhaps a retirement account with preferred tax rates? If you're retiring early, you should plan for the age that you're technically retired versus the age that your retirement accounts allow you for distributions. For example, with the Roth IRA, you could withdraw money at the age of 59 and a half, but if you were retiring at the age of 40, this actually creates a little bit of a gap. You want to be able to strike a balance between when you can withdraw from your taxable investment accounts versus when you're going to switch over to your different types of retirement accounts. Next, if you are currently single, your future partner may be a huge factor in if you can retire early or not. Once you get married, you're adding another variable into the entire situation, and your partner and you should have a heartfelt talk on whether or not retiring early is a priority for both of you or just one of you. If you do marry someone with similar goals, then you should be stronger together and be able to retire even faster than most average people. Now, if you have children, you probably already know this, but children are very expensive. So you just want to plan accordingly, knowing that if you're going to have kids, it might take a little bit longer to retire. This should go without saying. If you don't have kids, you don't have that big expense of having a child, but you might be able to retire a lot faster. The fourth must do is...
Might be, I would say almost certainly, right? Children are very, very costly. And, obviously I have two myself. And so they're very, very important to me and worth every penny, of course, but without the expense of a child, your path towards a early retirement is a lot clearer and a lot faster.
Try to keep your investment fees as low as possible. Don't try to time the market and just avoid bad debt. When it comes to this stuff, at the end of the day, it just really is about enjoying your life.
I'd agree with that. I would agree with the avoid bad debt and avoid get rich quick stuff. Keeping your costs low, is that important? Yeah. Is that gonna, by keeping your costs low, is that gonna all of a sudden open up magic door to get you to early retirement? Absolutely not. I don't believe that at all. When you put together an investment portfolio, costs are definitely a big factor, and we want to make sure we're paying attention to that. But cost is only relevant in the absence of value. Okay, and so again, cost in your investments important. Certainly overrated here.
Life, and that might change from day to day or even year to year, so it's important to be flexible and just live out the many versions of life might present to you. I hope this video helps you out. I'm gonna leave my video up on the 4% rule right here or right here. It's
great. Yeah, and so really enjoyed the video. I think he put this together really, really well. I'll add one last thing here. If you're looking to retire early, certainly and want to be a part of the FIRE movement, having a professional help you and put together a full-blown early retirement plan is just absolutely going to help your success rate tremendously here, right? He doesn't mention this in the video, and of course I'm biased to it being a certified financial planner and doing this for individuals directly as my business, of course. So shameless plug here, but the idea is that if you want to retire in your 40s or 50s, working with a certified financial planner or a good fiduciary is just absolutely, I think, the number one thing you would want to do. To be able to, number one, crunch the numbers properly, be able to meet with you on a consistent basis to keep that plan intact, and to make sure that we get you there. And so it is doable, it is possible. It takes a lot of detailed planning, but it can be done. And a lot of younger folks, a lot of millennial and Gen Z professionals are really thinking about this. And so, I would say, based on his ending, steps there, ending tips, work with a good professional that you like working with would be the most critical, because they are definitely going to be able to save you on costs, on mistakes, on crunching the numbers properly for you, and also keeping you into that plan and keeping your investments going. And so anyway, well, I hope you enjoyed my video and how to retire early. Hopefully you found this to be very helpful. Please like and subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss the next video. And also, please, in the comments below, let me know what you think. You dislike it, you like it, and then also please let me know of any other topics or videos you'd like me to react to, and I will do my best to get the job done for you. So thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.